Oh, you didn't know? Your ass better call somebody!
The energy revealed. Brooklyn to Queens, reppin' both hoods. Rob and CP, keep it fire misunderstood. Cheer 'em all loud, let the anthem flow. Mets fans unite at the pregame show. From city stand lights to the skyline greens. It's the heartbeat of Queens, the craziest dreams. Rob hype on the mic, CP's the fire spark. Together they ignite. Voices like the park fans dripped in jerseys. Legacy bold, the Metropolitan story forever told. Turnstile spinning, the crowd floods the gates. This is family, no time for debates. Crack of the Batman, the roar never fades. Queens in the blood, it's how champions are made. Cheer 'em all loud, let the anthem flow. Mets fans unite at the pregame show. From city stand lights to the skyline gleams. It's the heartbeat of Queens, the craziest dreams. 7-line swagger, vibes electric and wild. Mets legacy golden since I was a child. Orange crushed skies, let the battle ignite. Ride for the home team till the last fight.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to the Amazing Mets pregame show right here on the channels and on X. And oh, what a beatdown it was by the New York Mets offense. 19 runs at Citi Field, a franchise record at home. And that was just a beautiful sight to see. And not only that, I think Jonathan got enough run support in this game to not really worry too much. But we saw the kid yesterday. He was the happiest kid in the world yesterday. There was no doubt about it. This guy was absolutely having the best time of his life, smiling when he got his first strikeout in the third inning. It was a lot of good vibes yesterday. The fans were there just going crazy, and it was a lot of good things happening at Citi Field last night. Chris, how you doing, buddy?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I'm not in my usual setup here, so forgive me for any sort of difficulties that we might encounter here. But yesterday was fantastic. Zach and I were live for the post-game stream on the channel talking about the win. It's sort of a weird game with how early and often the Mets offense got the scoring done behind Jonah Tong. A couple of long periods of time where he had to sit in between innings, and he just felt like maybe he was getting a little bit antsy. He was at the top step. He was ready to go back out there and take the mound. So a really good start for Jonah Tong nonetheless. Yeah, he was smiling from ear to ear throughout most of the game. He looked like he was having a blast out there. He did well. I mean, he did well. The defense really didn't help him out, so the overall numbers are a little bit elevated. I think he gave up a couple of earned runs, and then the other 2 runs that were scored with him on the mound were unearned because the defense was just very lackadaisical in that one inning. But nonetheless, 97 pitches, 5 innings. I'm sure there's some stuff to improve upon in his next start, but you'll take that all day, every day. And with the way that this offense is looking right now, if they're able to put up even a fraction of what they did last night, this team's going to be in really good shape.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a very tough game to judge from Jonathan yesterday because, I mean, you had a 10-0 lead in the second inning of a game. I mean, it's it's a whole different ball game with a 10-run lead while you're pitching on the mound. There's not a lot of nervousness and angst and, making that perfect pitch to get that guy out. So there wasn't a moment like that in this game that you can really pinpoint. I think I'd rather win every game 19-9. I mean, I wouldn't have to worry about any pitcher. I think we all would love that, but it's a hard game to judge Jonah Tong, even though he had 5 innings, 6 hits, 4 runs, 1 earned, because the Mets did, bounce the ball around a little bit defensively. And that's something that they have to get better on, because you can lose to a team. They did the other night against the Marlins, but against good teams, they will make you pay. That's something that we have to fix. And he had 6 strikeouts on the evening, and it was a solid performance for his first time out. But it's just looking at the numbers and just to watch the way he pitched, it's hard to judge, because would he be using different pitches in certain counts? If the score was 2-1, That's something that we would all have to wait and see if when that happens. But what I did like, and I did tweet that last night, is the fact that we saw Nolan McLean is not afraid to throw his fastball to get guys out. He goes after guys, and Jonah Tong did the same thing when he needed a big pitch. He went to his fastball, and that is something Manaea, Senga, and Holmes need to learn, because these kids do it, and they're not afraid to go after a hitter and go with their best pitch. And that is something that you like to see with the young kids in Tong and McLean.
I 100% agree with that assessment, Rob. I mean, at the end of the day, I think a lot of pitchers can say, maybe outside of the guy that's starting for the Marlins today, and Edward Cabrera, who's very talented, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. I do think that a lot of pitchers around this league can definitely say, especially if the fastball is 95 plus and has a lot of, any sort of movement really on a fastball will get the job done. But that is predominantly the best pitch a pitcher can utilize. And going away from that, getting too cute, it leads to walks. It leads to inefficient at bats. And so I agree with you 1,000% in the assessment of the first 4 starts combined from McLean and Tong now as of last night. When they are in a little bit of a jam, because we did see some situations where Tong was in a little bit of a jam, you go back to your bread and butter. And that fastball, especially for Jonah Tong, and the advanced metrics behind it, induced vertical break. I think even Nolan McLean was talking about how lively and how good that pitch is from Jonah Tong even before he came up. You got to go to your bread and butter. I know the changeup's really good for Jonah Tong. I know that he has a curveball that he can utilize as well. He only threw a slider 1 time last night in the entirety of the 97 pitches. That's something that I would expect for him to develop in the offseason, to try to utilize a little bit more as a 4th pitch in 2026 is that slider, because it's really just not there as of yet. And him only throwing it 1 time last night tells you all you need to know about the confidence level behind that pitch. But when you have 97, 98 in your back pocket with that much, IVB, right? And that much advanced analytics surrounding and supporting the pitch, just throw it. Just throw it. There's no reason not to. So I like that game plan a lot from these young guys over their first few starts of their career. And I definitely do think that the other pitchers in this rotation, namely Senga, maybe not so much Senga, because I think that we all know what his best pitch is, the ghost fork, and the fastball relatively gets killed, especially if it's out over the heart of the plate for Senga. But I think Clay Holmes and Manaea, those 2 guys in particular, can learn something. I know Manaea's, I guess, whatever you want to attribute it to, but the velocity is down overall. But I think with his movement and his delivery, it's so deceptive that he can still induce swing and miss, especially at the top of the zone with his fastball. So I think if it's one lesson to be learned from Clay Holmes and Manaea, especially being a little bit more efficient and trying to get that put away pitch going, it's just rely on your fastball a little bit more. I think that would make things a lot easier.
Yeah, I think it would be a great sign if you see the other guys in this rotation. Started with Peterson today. And, Peterson has been, one of our best pitcher, before McLean showed up. But because he's gone after guys. He gets out of, he's not afraid to go after guys to get guys out, instead of nibbling like, Kodai Senga loves to do and Clay Holmes likes to do. And even, Manaea is starting to look like he's doing at this point. And yeah, I agree. When it comes to Manaea and the miles an hour off the fastball, that's concerning to me. I still think that's an elbow issue waiting to happen. I think that's something that we're going to hear in the offseason, but that's for another conversation. But it rejuvenated, McLean and Tong has rejuvenated this fan base, because this team was dead in the water. We all completely understand that. We all know that. Like, we felt it. There was nothing that was there that we can get excited about, because they just looked like a dead team. Even though they were winning a couple of games and they were keeping their head above water and remaining in the playoff spot, it just didn't feel like they were doing anything well. And what Nolan McLean has done and what Tong did yesterday, you heard the fan base. You heard the fans yesterday at Citi Field. Even when he was getting a little bit behind in counts, they started to, cheer him up. He started them, getting on their feet to get him going. When he threw a strike, the big roar. You could see how fast a little bit of young juice in this organization, on this roster, can rejuvenate a team and a fan base within a week and a half. And that is something that's nice to see, and hopefully it continues. But we can't have Tong and McLean be the only ones picking us up. It's got to be David Peterson today. It's got to be Minaya Senga tomorrow, and then the next day with Minaya. It's got to continue, and hopefully these veterans can, I guess, pick up where these young kids left off, and with the energy that they brought. And you just hope that they turn around. I'm not saying they have to be great. They just got to be better, because there's a situation after losing the game one against the Marlins. You got to win the next two games. You cannot split this series, Chris. And I talked about this a couple of days ago, that a split would be very disappointing, considering how you beat down the Phillies and swept them, and you were on the verge of having a great homestand before your 10-game road trip in September. They need to win these next two games. I don't care who's on the mound. I don't care who's in the lineup. You're better than this team. The Marlins aren't a team that they were a couple of weeks ago when they were, playing the best baseball of the season. I truly think the Mets need to just continue what they did yesterday. Don't give them any chance to, take a breath, and just beat them down. And it starts with David Peterson on the mound, and then Senga tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, this is the game that I had circled outside of the Tong start because of who is on the mound for the Marlins. Edward Cabrera is just super talented, posting really good numbers, was a guy that the Mets, I think, had some interest, as well as a handful of other teams around this league, in terms of improving their rotation at the deadline. And clearly he remained a Marlin, and that is the correct decision all day long, because that guy is going to be headlining their rotation for years to come. They thought originally it was going to be Sandy, who's going on the mound for them tomorrow, but no, Edward Cabrera is the real deal. So, I know what the offense put up yesterday. It was awesome. It was refreshing. This offense basically has rejuvenated us as a fan base right now, right? And deservingly so. Or I should say, it's about time that they have, because we waited all season long for them to get to this point and start producing this type of production offensively, especially behind the pitching. I'm curious how this game is going to go from the offensive standpoint, right? It just seems like right now this Mets offense can put up uh, any amount of runs against any pitcher, but can they do it against a guy like Cabrera? That's something that I'm going to be very curious to see. And then David Peterson as well against this lineup. I mean, this lineup again is just it's dreary for the Marlins, but somehow, some way, they just find a way to have their best at bats against the New York Mets, and it's just a continuous thing. Edwards at the top of their lineup and Otto Lopez, they're really talented. They're really pesky, right? They get on base a lot, and they provide their run providers for their team. They get on base and they find a way to score any way possible. So keep those two guys, namely, off the bases. And I think that David Peterson is well on his way to a good start tonight, but you got to limit the walks. Last time out, David Peterson was going well. Everything was going well until it wasn't, because he started walking batters. And that's something that you just simply can't have. It's not only David Peterson, Clay Holmes, same thing. Kodai Senga, same thing. They need to limit the walks. If you are in a situation where, and I know this kind of goes against the point that the defense needs to tighten up for the New York Mets, but you should be able to entrust your defense, make them put it in play. Free passes will come back and bite you. Ask Kodai Senga about that. He was good at stranding base runners earlier this season, and now he's not so good at it, and it's coming back to bite him, and the ERA is skyrocketing. The walks and hits per innings pitch have always been a little bit elevated compared to the ERA for Senga. But yeah, man, I think that this is the game where I'm like, it's kind of a toss-up, I guess. You got to get Cabrera out of this game as early as possible. Make him be inefficient, even if you're only able to scratch off 1 or 2 runs. I'm not saying, and I'm not trying to limit what the Mets can do against Cabrera. They can go out there and absolutely shell him, just like they did with Perez, who was having a really good season yesterday. They went out there and said, I don't care, 39 pitches for you without recording it out. See you later, bring in the bullpen. I would love for that to be replicated tonight. I don't think it's going to, but you know what? At the end of the day, with the way that this offense is moving right now, Rob, I think they're a juggernaut, and um, the Mets are winning games. If McLean or Tong are not on the mound, this offense needs to will this team to victory. David Peterson's having a good season, a really good season, actually. I don't want to diminish what he's done, but all in all, I just feel like if your name is not Nolan McLean right now, you got to put up the necessary runs because I guess, for lack of a better term, shit could hit the fan at any moment with these pitchers.
Yeah, and we talked about it yesterday on the pregame. 4 runs or less, it's a pretty good chance the Mets are going to lose. That's just how it's been when McLean's not on the mound. That's how it's been, and that's the unfortunate part. Now, again, you hope these guys figure it out. That's the only thing you can hope for because, again, somebody's got to pitch in the playoffs. You can't just put McLean and Tong out there and hope for the best. You got to get these guys are going to pitch, and that's why they got to figure it out. And again, I have a little more confidence in David Peterson. Maybe he did hit a little bit of a wall, get into another high limit of the season, considering that he never had back-to-back seasons with well over 100 innings. That's something that you always worry about. Again, I don't trust Manaea. I don't trust Senga. I don't know what you're going to get from these guys. They got to be a decision made very shortly because you can't keep them running them out there when you're trying to make the playoffs. And I think the Mets will make the playoffs, but still, it's still up in the air until you clinch that game that you make the playoffs. You still got to worry about that because they're going to be a problem down the stretch. I mean, that 10-game road trip in September, let's get to that 10-game road trip and before we even really get into this game. That's a stretch where they're going to pitch. There's no doubt about it. There ain't nobody else coming. Maybe you'll see McGill in that mix somewhere along the line in that 10-game stretch. But other than that, somebody's got to figure it out, and we're hoping that one of them do. Because I think if you get Peterson, get him somewhat back on track and pitching well still, you got 3 guys. If you get one of Senga and Manaea to pitch starting to figure things out, now you feel a little bit better about a rotation that has been a big question mark for the majority of the year. And thanks to McLean and thanks to Tong, they actually, they hopefully are pushing these guys a little bit. And you hope that happens. Again, will it? Who the hell knows? But it comes back to guys just stepping up. The offense finally stepped up, right? They finally did what we were all expecting them to do. They're scoring well over 7 runs per game over almost a month now. So they figured it out. There's more than 4 guys hitting in this lineup at any given moment. And this is a hard lineup to get through, as you can see, even in the Philly series. The pitching just needs to be, I don't even want great. Give me above average. Give me above average. Can you get through 6 innings of 3 runs or less? I don't see how that's so hard to ask from guys like Manaea and Senga. And I hope we get it from Peterson today. He's been, Mr. Consistent for the most part. But, man, it's just so frustrating that guys like Manaea, who's been in this league, that we've seen what he can do. Now, maybe he's hurt. I don't know. Maybe that elbow is just too much pain and he can only do so much. I don't know. Senga, I still don't have no idea. I don't know what the hell his problem is, but they got to figure it out. If not, I throw McGill in there and see what happens. Worst case scenario, McGill might, find some life. You know how McGill goes. He'll have 6 straight games of great performances and then he'll suck for the next 10. So that's a situation where the Mets really have to think about McGill coming back and you might hit lightning in a bottle at least for maybe 5 or 6 starts.
That's why I think you have to find a way to get both McGill and Brandon Sproat up here because you have pitchers that are going and proving to you consistently at this point that they're not capable of going 6+. You're getting 4+, maybe 5+. And so you need the extra relief. And I do think if McGill comes up, he will be inserted into the rotation one way or another. But I'm talking about Brandon Sproat specifically here because I think some people are talking about Sproat in the chat. I know that he didn't really do well in the the showing the other week out of the bullpen. I understand that, but that's a new role for him. And I still think a guy of his caliber can come up here and maybe provide a spark, just like Jonah Tong and Nolan McLean are doing right now. So I'd be willing to take that risk with Brandon Sproat because at this point you have a multitude of guys that are starting to kind of fizzle out of the bullpen anyways. I think Ryan Stanek, his spot on this team is virtually useless right now. What are you using Ryan Stanek for? You're using him in any leverage situations because he's coming in when the game's already out of reach. Just basically mop up duty at that point, right? Unfortunately, Helsley hasn't been as advertised, right, since coming over from the Cardinals, and now three outings in a row. Gregory Soto has looked like he's lost it too with the control. He's starting to walk batters and getting hit hard. So you need some more bullpen pieces coming up. I would like to see the Mets utilize Rogers a lot more. He's got a rubber arm, and I think they're underutilizing him right now. Even the booth was saying how with his mechanics and just the way that he throws, he can throw back-to-back days, no problem. And so I would like to see a little bit more of that when we get into some situations where we have, closer ball games, because I think the offense has just been absolutely ridiculous right now. So we've been seeing a lot of, games that are out of reach. And so then you put in guys like Stanek and, a get right game for Ryan Helsley. But that's the reason why, with the lack of production from this rotation, if they're not going to move off of anybody in this rotation, if they're not willing to put a guy like Manaea into the bullpen, I think what they're going to do is most likely just insert McGill into the rotation if possible, and then just have Brandon Sproat come up here, be a fresh bullpen arm, and just piggyback either McGill or Senga if he continues to go the measly, 4 innings that we saw out of him last start. So I think you got to do it. And the time is ticking, right? I mean, it's August 30th. The 31st is tomorrow, and tomorrow is actually the deadline. Sunday, I believe by 11:59, if they're not on the roster come midnight, they're not going to be postseason eligible. Those are your September call-ups. So it's do or die time, and we'll find out very shortly if the Sproat is getting the call or not. But I honestly think, Sproat was supposed to be on the fast track here, the first guy of the 3 pitchers in the major leagues. He got set back in AAA, which is when he started to fizzle down a little bit with the production, and that kind of hindered him. But I think with McLean and Tong already here, I just don't see a world where they just don't do the 3 for 3. Now, if they have innings issues and concerns with Brandon Sproat, that's fine. Hence why he's going into the bullpen for, 2 to 3 innings per outing versus being a starting pitcher and trying to expand the innings like they're doing with McLean and Tong right now. But I just think it makes too much sense to not have him on this roster, right? Like, you got to roster him. You got to have another arm here. And some of the bullpen guys and the production that you're getting from some of these bullpen guys is just concerning at this point. Whether it's a lack of talent, whether it's, I don't know what it is, because this bullpen on paper should be locked down. They should be locked down, and it's not. And it's just another headache for Carlos Mendoza to have to worry about.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I honestly think the best case scenario is to bring up McGill, bring up Sproat. If you got DFA Stanek, you got to bring somebody else down that's not going to be on the playoff roster. I think you got to have all arms that you could possibly have available, that you have options going into the postseason, right? Depending on the matchup, you might want certain pitchers in your bullpen other than other guys, depending on matchups and how you feel like, certain arms are going to go against the Phillies or the Dodgers or whoever we might be facing in the playoffs in the first series in the playoffs. That's something but I think you need the options. Like I said, bring up Sproat. Can he be worse than Stanek? If he is, you have a better understanding of what he is at the moment. It's not going to determine what he's going to be next year, but at least you have the option. Same thing with McGill. You gotta put these guys on the roster because they could be valuable, not just because you can use them in September, regardless if they're going to be on the playoff roster or not, but you have that option to use them if you need them on the playoff roster. And if you got to leave somebody out, you got to leave somebody out. And I think that you can probably worry about who might pitch well, but you don't know if they're not up here. And it would suck if, like, say, Brandon Sproat, they don't bring him up tomorrow and the deadline's over and they bring him up and he'll be one of the September call-ups. And he pitches extremely well out of the bullpen. Now you're just losing a bullpen. Now he'll win you games, which would be great. He'll help you get to the playoffs. But now he's not available because he's not eligible for the postseason because you brought him up after September 1st. It's just something that I hope they don't do, because it would be really annoying if Brandon Sproat does pitch well out of the bullpen when they call and he's a September call-up and he's not eligible for the postseason. I mean, that would just look really bad on Stearns, who makes moves every single day, but he can't make the one move that is probably necessary before the eligible postseason deadline of August 31st at 11:59. I think it's silly to not have him do that. And again, you got to look at the roster. You got to see, is Mauricio a candidate of going down? He's basically useless on this team, right? I have no problem. If you want to, honestly, I think Acuna is going to come up. You're going to see him replace Mauricio because I think Acuna has shown with his speed that he can be very beneficial in September and beyond if you need him. So I think you're going to see Mauricio go down. Acuna is going to replace him. Static is probably going to get DFA'd. We'll see. I don't know who else they can actually send down, but it's going to be very interesting because there could be a lot of moving parts come tomorrow, and it's going to be something to talk about, especially starting September 1st.
Yeah, and it's not just like you were mentioning, it's not just from the pitching perspective too. It's who's going to be coming up here to take one of the bench spots. And I know that Siri and Winker made their rehab assignment starts in the first game in St. Lucie, but I haven't really followed up and haven't been keeping track of what they've been doing since then. So if it's one thing about this organization and David Stearns is that Rob, they're going to prioritize the veterans. So I would not be shocked whatsoever. Although Acuna, he has been coming up and down, and they also have shown that they value him being on the bench as well. And he definitely does serve a purpose defensively and in terms of just overall base running late in games. So I don't know. It's going to be a toss-up, but if unfortunately, because I don't think that this is a smart idea, but to theoretically, quote unquote, get your best offensive personnel on the bench, I think that if Winker is ready to go, I think they're going to bring him up. I think he'll be taking one of the spots. That's just my two cents.
And just so everybody's aware, if you're on the IL and you played a game this year prior to September 1st, you are eligible to be on the postseason roster. So even if Winker comes back September 7th, he's eligible for postseason. I just want to make people, because people will be like, well, he's not going to be ready until September 5th. Well, it's okay because he's played a game during the season prior to September 1st. So he is eligible to come back and be postseason eligible, along with Jose Siri.
Yeah, it's just a matter of just like the roster spots that I was talking about that they would be taking at that point.
Yeah, I was just curious because caught me for a second too. I'm like, yeah, he is eligible, right? So yeah, I was just making sure that everybody knew that before we get a little bit further into this discussion. Brad talked about Davinsky will pitch today, then get DFA'd, and then we'll bring up Sproat. That's probably the logical option, right? That's obvious. I think when McGill is ready, and it looks like McGill is going to be ready very, very soon. Well, I mean, you can't wait. I think Stanek is probably going to get replaced by McGill, and that's where you have options with those both guys. Both guys can start. Both guys can go into the bullpen. I think McGill, obviously, Chris talked about it. McGill is probably the right one to put in the rotation just because the veteran presence and what he can do. Again, McGill's the guy that can, again, knock off 5 straight games of really good performances in the starting role, and we'll see what we can get from him. But I think they're going to try Sproat in the bullpen. I mean, why not? I mean, you can't trust Helsley. Stanek's just a waste of time, a waste of a roster spot. Maybe you will hit lightning in the bottle with Sproat. Maybe Sproat just needs, like we talk about with some minor leaguers and some prospects, they get bored. And you do wonder if it's just a stagnant everyday outing, and he's just like, all right, I don't want to be here anymore. I should be in the majors. And you hope he gets that extra jolt being in the majors and the talent just comes out. And that's what you hope. You would see that with certain guys you haven't at times. Like I thought Mauricio was just, even though he was lighting up AAA, it felt like he was, and Acuna the same thing. It just feels like when they're there, it's just they're not doing enough. Like Acuna is not really doing much in AAA, but that he probably is bored. And I wonder if Brennan Sproat is getting that way as well. When he was the guy before McLean, before Tong, he was the guy on the fast track, as you said, Chris, who was going to be here first. And he's going to be the third guy here. And nobody's really talking about him to the point where it's like, oh, Brandon Sproat's here. Oh, that's nice. We totally forget, like, Brandon Sproat was the guy. I do think that kind of mentally kind of like pushed him back a little bit. Like, damn, that was supposed to be me. And anybody can feel like that. You are human. I do wonder if he gets to if they put him on this big league team, he would get that rejuvenation. He would get that energy that I think he has. Because I'm not saying he's going to be an ace, but I do think that he can help this bullpen, even if he hasn't done well in a couple of appearances in the bullpen. I feel like he can be a plus for this team, especially when you can actually use him in the postseason if you bring him up tomorrow.
Adrenaline is a hell of a thing, Rob.
Yeah.
Adrenaline's a hell of a thing, and people perform usually well with the adrenaline because they just stop thinking, right? And so I feel like that's why the young guys so far have succeeded from the pitching perspective and standpoint. But it's just extra motivation as well. I mean, for Spro, like watching Tong and McLean get the promotion, like great, like he's probably celebrating because those are his teammates and he's played with them and he's happy for them. But there has to be, a competitor's mindset at a certain point too. And it's just like, well, that also should be me, damn it. Like promote me and let me have my shine too. So I think that definitely is, long-term success or not. I think that face value, the reward that the Mets can get from calling up a young arm like that, given the reasons of what I just stated, is definitely just the right move. And I think that banking on that immediate success is a lot more. It's risk versus reward, but you take a little bit of a higher risk, but the reward is also going to be exponential rather than keeping an old veteran like Stanek on the roster who's just proven time and time again that he's not really good for anything at this point, and what he's shown so far this season outside of mop-up duty. And I'm good. I don't need mop-up duty guys in the bullpen. Give me impactful arms that are looking to prove something in the big leagues.
Yeah, exactly. And I wanted to ask you when it comes to like your biggest concern with this team. I mean, it's kind of obvious, but just to get your thoughts on this. The biggest concern in this team right now, because I think you can go two different ways. I think you can go to the bullpen, and you can still go to the starting rotation. I don't think most of us have concerns about the lineup anymore. I think we've seen what they can do. But what do you think is your biggest concern going down to this stretch run, heading into September and the rest of this couple of games in August?
My biggest concern is Gregory Soto and Ryan Helsley. Those are the two guys that I'm concerned with. I feel really good about the New York Mets if those guys can get it together come the playoffs. But if those two arms are showing themselves not to be an option for Mendoza in higher leverage situations, and they're just continuously doing what they've been doing. I mean, Soto started off tremendously with the Mets, has fizzled out over the past 3 outings. We knew, like when he came on board, right, and the Mets made the trade for him, we knew the control was always an issue with Soto. He's got a lively arm, but that's what's really hindered him in his career is the control. But the upside is definitely there. Helsley, I don't know what the hell Helsley's problem is because a lot of people are talking about the tipping of pitches. That's fine and all, and you can use that as an excuse up until a certain point. But even yesterday when he came into the ball game, like I wasn't really convinced with what he was doing because I believe the first batter that he faced hit a double off of him down the line anyway. So I think those two guys, the guys that Stearns traded for to make a really good bullpen on paper, need to live up to expectations, and that's probably my biggest concern. I would say even more so than the rotation, right? The rotation could alleviate some of that stress that those two guys might be putting on this fan base and Mendoza. But at a certain point, I think the bullpen, it's necessary for a World Series contending team to have a really good bullpen to lock things down. And I think that the status of this bullpen is going to rely and be in the hands of those two guys if they're going to turn it around or not.
Yeah, I'm going to stick to my guns from the day on opening day when I talked about the starting rotation. I know McLean's here now. I know Jonathan is here now. But I think the bullpen can get manipulated to the point where you could throw Manaea in there. You could throw Sproat in there. You could throw McGill in there. I think there's combinations where you can work with guys on your roster that you don't have to start them and put them in the bullpen and know you can probably get really 2 good innings out of them at any given moment. And we've seen teams that go deep into games or deep into the playoffs, they usually use some of their starters in the bullpen to get a couple of innings to piggyback off a really good start, or even 4 or 5 innings from a good pitcher and try to get 3 more from a starter that's in the bullpen. I think the Mets can do that regardless of who's pitching well or not in the bullpen at any day basis. Like if Helsley is still going to, shit the bed going into the playoffs, I mean, would anybody be shocked if he's not on that postseason roster? Strong possibility. Because you have to think about that, because you can't waste a roster spot and leave him on the roster. And depending on, obviously, you shorten up games. The bullpen's going to be used a little bit more. We all know that with the postseason. They try to shorten games rather quickly with these starters. Any signs of trouble, you go into a bullpen arm. You can't have a situation where Helsley is coming in the 7th inning in a close game and there's no confidence in him. I think that's a dangerous game to play, but that's why I think you can manipulate the roster. Even though if he's on the postseason roster, you could still have a McGill or a Manaea or something like that, where if Manaea is not going to be your top 3 pitchers in the wild card series, let's say, he's going to the bullpen. And I'd rather have Manaea, who's shown he can pitch really well for 2 innings at least, that you have an option to use him over Helsley. And obviously Manaea can get lefties and righties out. And unless Helsley performs outstanding the next couple of weeks, there's no confidence in him. And I still worry about the rotation, just because I think you can manipulate the bullpen with starters in your bullpen when it comes to postseason time. So especially in a wild card series, when you're only going to go with 3 starters anyway, you have a couple of starters that are going to be on this roster, in the postseason roster, that are going to be in the bullpen. And it only makes sense that it's either Sproat, Manaea, McGill, or all 3 of them, to be quite honest with you. That's a possibility as well. But I'm going to stick with the problem with the rotation. I still feel like Peterson is going to be okay. I think McLean's a beast. Again, let's see Tong pitch in a game that's much closer, and he doesn't spend 30 minutes in the first inning and the second inning to get back on the mound. It's very hard to judge what he can do. Do I think he can do it? Yeah. You see how he is on the mound. He's a gamer. Let's see him continue to do it like McLean has to do it, and then we can have a conversation about the confidence in the rotation. But I'm going to stick to my guns and say rotation still, because of the manipulation that the bullpen – you can do with the bullpen when it comes to postseason time.
Yeah, and that's valid too. The bottom line is, though, between our 2 answers, me saying the bullpen guys and you saying the rotation, is that hopefully one of those groups is able to pick up the other, because they go hand in hand, especially in the playoffs. Like you said, when you have a little bit of a shorter hook on the pitchers, if they're not really performing well, you don't hesitate to go into the bullpen. Like, let's not have that happen, right? If Helsley and Soto still can't get it together, this rotation needs to get it together. So more so for me, I'm kind of like watching what the pitching has been doing. Yeah, the additions of Tong and McLean are nice, but I'm not really talking about a wild card series, because you're right, Manaea would go to the bullpen in that scenario if he's not going to be starting one of those games. I'm talking more about a divisional series or a championship series where the games are just more games. You play more games hypothetically, and you just need to go back and expand maybe to like a 4 or 5 rotation, right? Instead of just your top 3. So, or you could stick with the top 3 and just figure something out for the 4th game if it's just, you're on the verge of sweeping, but that's not usually how teams roll. So, yeah, I agree. The offense is just not a concern anymore at this point. I think that they've proven to all of us that they have consistently hit the baseball, and you shouldn't be worried about this offense. Now it's the pitching side of things turn to get things right. And I don't know. We'll see. One of those position groups has to pick up the other. That's all I'll say.
Correct. 100% with that. And, people are talking about Walker Buehler in the comments. Again, you only got 1 day to do it. You got the rest of today and tomorrow to pick him up. Again, he's useless if you're going to pick him up after September. That really doesn't make sense. The only team that should pick him up after September 1st is teams that are not going to make the playoffs. And you just hope that, Walker Buehler will catch on with a team, pitch well for the last month, and looking for another contract. That's all I can think he can be doing. But, yeah, I think there's going to be a contending team that is going to pick up Walker Buehler. And I think the Mets should be one of them, to be honest with you. What's the worst case scenario? You pick him up for a couple million, for league minimum, because you don't got to pay him anything. Get him today, get him tomorrow, have him on the roster, let him pitch a game or two, let him be in the bullpen or whatever you want to do with him. But that's a guy that I said it the other day. That is a guy that you've seen what he can do in the playoffs. I know he's had a really bad season with the Red Sox. Wasn't very good. That was kind of the guy we both wanted Walker Buehler for the New York Mets, and he's a big disappointment. But there's something about a guy like that that shows up in the playoffs, and regardless of the numbers, it is funny, Chris, how a lot of people are talking about Walker Buehler, but his numbers suck. But when we were at the trade deadline and people were talking about the numbers that weren't good for certain players, now nobody cares about the numbers, but they hear the name Walker Buehler and they see what he did against the Mets and see what he did against the Yankees. And that's why people want him. And that's where I agree. And I don't know if Stearns is going to do that. I think he has many options, but I mean, he would be stupid not to do it. But there will be a team that will pick up Buehler, in my opinion.
I think, to be honest, right, you're not going to pick up Buehler to be a starter. He's going to be strictly out of the bullpen like he did for the Dodgers, in their championship run last season. I think if they go get Buehler, then you're not going to see Sproat this season. I think it's going to be one or the other. I think that you either have Sproat up here or you go get Buehler, like whatever Stearns decides. I don't think that they have enough room for both of those guys. That's what I think.
I would take Buehler. Nothing against Sproat. I just feel like I've seen Buehler do it before. I love the veterans. I love postseason experience in the postseason, specifically with pitchers. When it comes to offensive guys, position players, I don't know. But pitchers, I always feel that way. Like with Stanek, right? He wasn't pitching well with the Mets when he first got him. He was okay. Mayton was better than Stanek when they got him during the season, and Stanek was the man in the postseason. I think those guys matter when they've been there, done that. And obviously Walker Buehler has been there, done that.
And that's fine with me too.
Yeah.
If that's the decision, I also agree with that. I mean, we saw just the run that he had, last season coming out as like a long relief option, obviously closing out some ball games for them too. Like, I'm fine with that, but I'm just saying, like, I just don't think, if that's the role that they're already thinking about for Sproat and having him go out there and coming out of the bullpen as of recent to try to gear up for that, you won't have probably two guys in Sproat and Buehler. I think it's one or the other. But if the decision is to go with the proven option, and that's Walker Buehler, right, then so be it. I mean, I guess you could say that he's a little bit of a head case, but I think that the guy definitely has some sort of pedigree that we've seen before in high leverage situations and games that actually matter. So I wouldn't be, though I think it's likely. I don't think David Stearns is going to do it. I'd actually be highly shocked if he does. But if he does do it, if that's what he's been thinking all along, ever since the Red Sox did make that move to let him go, then more power to him. Let's gear up. Let's get him acclimated to, what the Mets are doing in the bullpen, and let's have him ready for October. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, this is why I didn't like the plan of Brandon Sproat and why he should have been up here a week ago. I think he should have been up here, regardless if you want to throw him in the bullpen or not. At least you had an idea. Again, Walker Buehler wasn't DFA'd yet, so that conversation would have been had. But why not bring up Sproat a week ago? Regardless if you were going to throw him in the bullpen or not, I would have just brought him up. I would have started him, and I would have thrown, wait for McGill to come back and throw him in the bullpen or Manaea, whoever. But I would have brought up Sproat. I would have seen if, getting him up to the majors and getting him starts here. He was pitching so well, over the last 6-7 starts where he finally figured it all out. It seemed like he put everything together, and it felt like a demotion. And, I mean, I don't care who you are. When you're finally figuring out AAA and you're playing well, you're pitching well, and the team's like, go to the bullpen. It's like, what? What do you? Come on! Like, I just feel like that was a bad way to go about it. I feel like they were late on every step or every way with these young pitchers. I understand the draft picks. I understand the keeping his rookie status and service time, all that nonsense that I truly don't care about. Luckily, the Mets are probably going to make the playoffs, because I know it's a very big hypothetical, but if the Mets don't make the playoffs, you can always go back to June when the Mets need to start in pitching, And we can all talk about in the offseason about the service time, the draft picks, the rookie status, and all that stuff, just to keep those guys a year extra. And you didn't bring them up in June. And I know that's been there, done that. It's too late now, but that's going to be a conversation if it does happen. It probably won't, but I feel like that plan sucked, and I didn't like the way they did it. And I think the way they dealt with Brandon Sproat is just not good. I think it's bad. I don't think it helps him at all. And I think you handcuff yourself in a situation where, let's say if they would have brought Brandon Sproat up, let's say a week ago, and thrown him in the bullpen, and he wasn't performing well. Now that Buehler's available, you could have picked him up and just say, all right, Sproat, you don't have it. It's all right. We still believe in you as a starter, and Walker Buehler could have filled that spot right there, and you would have had your problem solved. Now you got a day and a half to figure all this out in basically, less than 48 hours. That's a lot to deal with within 48 hours because you have no idea what Sproat's going to give you if he gets called up, which he probably will. And if you do pick up Walker Buehler, what do you do then? You're just going to leave Sproat down there and just not pitch him this year? It's interesting.
Yeah, there was definitely some room for bringing up Spro a little bit earlier, just as like a little bit of a trial run is what I think that you're trying to say. So you can have that decision already made by the time tomorrow rolls around. But what's done is done. I think that if that is like the difference that we're looking back on, come October, if the Mets don't make the playoffs, because they're going to make the playoffs, that's not even a question. But in your hypothetical scenario of them not making the playoffs, I think if you're sitting 5 games up of the Reds, at this point, almost at the beginning of September, like a lot of things have to go wrong in the month of September for the Mets to relinquish this playoff spot. So in that case, like, it's a whole organizational effort at that point. That means this team decided to stop hitting. That means we probably have seen like no guys in this rotation go 6+ innings and put this team in a position to win. Something drastically wrong has to go for that. Something has to go drastically wrong for that to happen. So it's a great day to win a ball game is what I'm going to say, Rob. That's what I'm going to say. It's a great day to win a ball game. Go out there, take a series lead so far ahead of Game 4 tomorrow. Something that I don't think you mentioned, unless I just missed it, but, Francisco Alvarez is back and he's playing in AAA, 3 days removed from getting a fractured pinky diagnosis and getting, his hand drilled at the plate after he was trying to rehab. It wasn't the same hand, thankfully. It was the different hand, although maybe you just want it to be the same hand at that point, although that is just throwing hands. So I don't really know how that works out, but dude, when is this guy going to catch a break? Like,
I don't know.
My question too is that, how are you going to reinsert him back into this team if he's going to have a splint on that thumb? I'm sorry, but like, if he can't throw a baseball that well, I'm sure he's practicing and practicing and practicing, but that doesn't give me much hope for him to be a regular catching option for this team. Maybe they roster him as a bat off the bench, but you cannot sacrifice that much defense if he can't throw a baseball well to throw somebody out. I'll just say that right now. So that is right now. It's good news that he continues to play and is trying to make this comeback in 2025 rather than set out the whole entire season into the offseason, recover fully. But the Mets have to be smart about it because that's a tricky situation. That's a disaster waiting to happen if you try to bring him back in a starting catching role, which I just don't think is feasible right now.
Yeah, I'm going to prioritize defense at the catcher position, especially in the playoffs. We don't know how he's going to throw. Maybe he will. But again, is his hands not going to get beat up because he's wearing a splint? Of course it is. He's going to get foul tipped. He might get hit by a pitch again. The ball might take a bad carom and hit him in that hand again or another hand. It's too risky to put him behind the plate at this point. If the Mets, I wouldn't even have rushed him. And I know the kid wants to play and he showed something coming back from the minors. But you can't afford Alvarez to be a problem behind the plate. You can't have that right now, especially when you have a defensive guy in Luis Torrens, and Sanger has held his own behind the plate as well. it's a dangerous game to play. Now, if he comes back and everything looks good, then fine. But it's a dangerous game to play, and I don't know. I feel like they're pushing it way too much. Like the Mets can score runs without Alvarez. You don't need Alvarez to win ball games offensively. I truly don't believe that. I mean, you see it now. Like 1 through 7 doesn't have Alvarez. Even if Alvarez was here, was he going to bat 6th, maybe 7th? Like the Mets should be scoring runs. And, the Mets were scoring runs last year without any production from Alvarez last year. So they can do it. I'm not worried about that. I got to prioritize defense. We've seen the last 2 games how bad the defense can, if it's a close game, those errors can cost you. That defense can cost you. And I hate losing games when you make bad errors or make bad defensive decisions. That hurts you. That is something that I'd rather just not have to worry about. Luis Torrens is perfectly fine. He's hitting a little bit, not as much as Alvarez was, but he's giving you the great defense, and he's doing a little bit of damage offensively. I'm okay with that. And if I have to live with that, I'm good. And that's why I think Chris is frozen. Chris, you there? I think Chris got froze, but I think he's going to come back at some point. So that's where we are when it comes to, what Chris was talking about with Alvarez. It's a dangerous game to play. We can't keep on figuring out if Alvarez can stay healthy. Like, I don't care what Alvarez does. If he does not stay healthy, he's not helping the team. Availability matters as a player. You can't be productive if you're out of the game. If you can constantly injure it. And he's been constantly injured. You can't go on a hot streak and then get hurt. I know that's, it's a crazy scenario how he got hurt when it comes to his hand. But again, don't slide head first. Like you are important to our team at that point. When the Mets were still struggling, you were one of the bright stars in this lineup. And now you're hurt again because you belly flopped because you don't know how to slide and you slid head first. You got to be smarter than that. You got to be very smart than that, as Chris finally got out, but I think he'll come back in a few. You got to prioritize defense. And Rushman, I don't know. I mean, I guess you could, but again, maybe. But if the Mets didn't trade for, better players, position player-wise, at the deadline, why do you think they're going to do it now in the offseason? Like, I just don't see it. The only thing that I think they would do was get another starting pitcher in here because you can't trust Manaea. You can't trust Senga. I know you got McLean, Sproat, Tong, but that's not enough to fill a rotation. I still don't trust Holmes. Like, we still have David Peterson for 1 more year. So I guess you could do that. But again, I'm not worried about catcher situation. I'm sick and tired of having to worry about an offensive catcher. It's not the end all be all anymore. This ain't the Mike Piazza days. This isn't the Gary Carter days. It's just not. It's not the same anymore. Like, give me a good defensive catcher, and I think Chris is back. There he goes. All right.
Sorry, man. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good, man. You're good. I was still talking about Alvarez, about the catching situation. Somebody brought up Adley Rushman for next year. That's something to talk about in the offseason, but maybe, I don't know, but I'm not worried about offense from a catcher. I say this time and time again, this is not the Mike Piazza days, the Gary Carter days, or, catchers being great offensive players. I want defense. If I got to suffer on the offensive side, especially with a lineup that should be carrying a team regardless of your catcher's offense, I'm worried about defensive with the catcher. And unfortunately, regardless if it's a fluke injury or not, Alvarez has hurt this team because he doesn't remain healthy. Availability matters. If you can't stay healthy, I don't care if you get hit by a pitch. I don't care if you get a foul ball off your hand or however you got hurt. You're constantly injured. That means you're injury prone. Regardless of how it happens, you're injury prone. Those hands are fragile. It takes one foul ball to knock you out of a ball game. And you can't rely on that type of guy at the plate when he's consistently injured, because one snap of a finger and he's hurt again. And that offense you counted on is now gone. I hate offensive catchers. It's just a bad way to, because the Mets were revolving their offense, or at least not now, but like a year or two ago, Alvarez was supposed to be that big bat that was coming in the lineup to be with Alonso. And I always worry about catchers because you see what happens. They constantly get hurt.
Yeah, and even when he gets hurt, and comes back, it takes him a little bit to get acclimated again. And that's also something that this team can't really afford right now. In addition to the uncertainty of him being able to come up and just play defense. So, there's two workings there, but I agree with you. But on the other hand, too, it's just like we were so finally happy to get a offensive minded catcher after having. I mean, I guess. Well, who was the last offensive minded catcher the Mets had before him? It was probably Travis d'Arnaud. You could say
Yeah.
potentially, right? I mean,
But even he
so
got hurt.
and yeah. So it's a tricky situation with Alvarez. I just hope at some point during his career he's able to stay relatively healthy. But catchers take a beating. Unfortunately, some of Alvarez's injuries to his hand haven't really been coming behind the plate either, though. They've been on the base paths, which is the most unfortunate thing about it. So I don't know what this season like. I have high expectations, but I almost have to remind myself to just like temper my expectations with Alvarez when he comes back, if he comes back and is able to do the miraculous thing here and coming back from two, not one, but two hand injuries over the past couple of weeks that he sustained. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting, Rob. That's we can only hope that he's going to come back and be productive. But if there's any long term risk, just shut him down. I mean, Terren, Sanger. Is that the ideal situation? No, but I feel like that's the least of the Mets' problems offensively if this offense is continuing the pace that they're on right now.
Yeah, and everybody wanted Alvarez back, and it was a breath of fresh air because the offense wasn't doing anything. That's why we wanted him back. It wasn't about his defense, like it just wasn't. And yeah, and a lot of people are talking about Mullins in the lineup tonight over Taylor, or today over Taylor. Again, guys, I keep on saying this. They got to get Mullins going. Like they really do. I know that pisses people off. Like, why is Taylor not playing after he gave you 4 RBIs, the most RBIs out of everybody in the lineup? They got to get Mullins going. You got him for a reason. And he still is a solid ball player. As much as people don't like him right now and feel like he's not good, not better, or at least good enough defensively, and not showing enough with the bat, they need to get him going. He's going to be on this roster the rest of the year into the postseason. You got to have him ready to go, regardless if he's on the bench or not. You can't sit him for 5 days and expect him to come up in a big spot as a pinch hitter and do something. You got to get him going a little bit. You got to get his confidence going. It's more about confidence because, again, if he starts to get going too, now you got basically a bench and a lineup that is hitting. And that's what you want. You want to be confident in making a pinch hit appearance with anybody off the bench. And that's what they're trying to do with Mullins. He's batting ninth, guys. Again, if we're worrying about Mullins not doing the job and the offense is not scoring runs, it's not probably just Mullins. It's probably everybody. That's what you have to worry about. You just want Mullins to get going a little bit. He needs to get that confidence. And that's what they're trying to do. And with the offense scoring runs like crazy, it's okay to put Mullins in a lineup and try to get him going a little bit.
That's the least of my worries. When I saw this lineup come out, I didn't even bat an eye when I saw Mullins because I just don't care that much. I mean, like, yeah, Tyrone Taylor definitely is the better offensive player right now, especially over the past couple of weeks. He's definitely the better defender. But if what you're saying is true, if that's what they really want to do is just get him going, however they can. I'm perfectly fine with it because the Mets are not going to lose today because Cedric Mullins is playing, over Tyrone Taylor. That just simply shouldn't be the case. That shouldn't be the difference maker. So, I do think that Tyrone Taylor should be prioritized a little bit more going into September at this point. Mullins is not a bad player by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not trying to say that whatsoever. But if Tyrone Taylor is hitting, right? Power aside, because Cedric Mullins is thought to be a lot more of a power guy than Tyrone Taylor for defensive purposes overall. If Tyrone Taylor's bat is competent, he's going to be getting the start. I have no doubt about that whatsoever. And so that's just the case. So I mean, hopefully Mullins does get it going. We've seen flashes from him as a New York Met thus far, but we just haven't seen him put together the complete package. And that's just something that he probably is going to be a bench guy on a playoff team,
Yeah,
right? He probably is going to be coming in as a pinch hitter maybe for a matchup based, situation. So get these guys reps. And that's pretty much what it is. How do you get the guys on your bench the most reps as possible and keeping them fresh? They're not worried about doing that with Mauricio overall by and large because probably Mauricio is going to be going back down, or he's just not going to be seeing the field whatsoever, and he'll just be taking up a roster spot. But I still do think that they have aspirations of playing Mullins on a semi-regular basis until October hits, and then they'll prioritize one over the other. Clearly, the advantage is Tyrone Taylor right now. Let's see if Mullins has anything to say about that for the next month or so.
yeah, and again, it's not the fact, and people saying about like with Mullins, why don't you just put him in a blowout game yesterday? Because what is that really solving? Nothing. He's going to face a really bad pitcher or a position player on the mound to hit a ball. What if he hits a home run? You think that's going to get him going, hitting a 68 miles an hour fastball from a position player? No. You got to get him going because again, you want to feel confident in any bat you're going into the playoffs with if you're going to pinch it for somebody. And Mullins should play. Again, if it's a close game and the Mets are up 3-2 in the seventh inning, Mullins is coming out of the game for defensive purposes and Taylor's going to be in there. So I'm not worried about that part of the decision making. Again, guys, you got to get these guys going. You can't bury guys like Ronnie Mauricio, like Chris just said. There's no point in playing him. He's not going to be on this postseason roster. Mullins will be. If you like it or not, it doesn't matter. The fact is, Mullins got to get going because, once again, if there's a guy that is in the postseason roster on another team and he comes in the bullpen, he comes out of the bullpen, and Mullins has good numbers off of him, who do you think is pitch hitting? It's going to be Mullins because they're going to go based on the numbers. They just are going to say, "Oh, Marte, go up to bat." They're going to do that, and you got to have Mullins ready to go. You can't have him ice cold with no confidence because he will get plate appearances in the postseason. If you don't think so, just look what the Mets did last year. Everybody got plate appearances last year. We complained about lineups during the postseason last year. Like, why isn't Winker in this game after he went crazy the game before, right? That is why you got to have these guys ready to go because at any moment, like it or not, the Mets are going to put these guys in the lineup in the postseason, regardless of what's going on. They like matchups. They don't play the hot hand all the time. And we complained about it last year in the postseason. Me and Chris did shows all day about the lineup being like, what the hell are you doing with this lineup? It's the postseason. Mullins will play. You got to get him going a little bit, and I'm okay with this lineup with Mullins in there.
Yeah, I've got really nothing else to add. I do apologize. I'm on my phone now here on StreamYard. It's a lot different. I can't really see the chat, so I don't know what's happening in the chat, but I definitely appreciate everyone being here as well with us on this pregame. I think it's about 20 minutes, 19 minutes until game time too. So something just, I guess my computer had to restart or whatever. So hopefully that can be settled by the time the post game rolls around and we're talking about a win on the post game. But yeah, I think it's a good conversation to have. I think that, even given the performance of this Mets team, they've been playing good baseball relatively recently, and that's awesome. Like that's we were searching for any positives that we could have been searching for, in the middle of that just absolutely horrible losing streak that they were on, and now we're starting to see positives and then some, like signs of life from this team, which is what we wanted. So continue the good play, win by any means. Like if a pitcher goes 4 innings and they're still able to win, yeah, that's not really the ideal way, right? We want to see the pitchers get it done too, but a win's a win at this point. Stack up wins and then just get hot at the right time before the playoffs. And again, I'll reiterate this before we hop out of here, is that Edward Cabrera is a very talented pitcher. I'm actually surprised when I went on his Baseball Savant page because I don't really pay attention to Marlins baseball whatsoever, so it's not like I'm like clocking in for every Edward Cabrera start. I wish I had the time to do that. I just don't. But he's not like, his sinker, his two-seamer, is his third most utilized pitch. He goes with a changeup and I believe a curveball as his top 2 pitches. And it's very well evenly distributed, which is the most shocking thing when I went on his Baseball Savant page to see what types of pitches that he throws. So expect a lot of off-speed pitches. He will mix in a four-seam fastball as well, but it's going to be a lot of movement, maybe more so junk than anything straight for this lineup. So that's what they should be prepared for. That's the scouting report on Edward Cabrera, who again is just having a really good season so far.
There you go, guys. So the Mets look to win another game in this series and take a 2-1 series lead. Going into the fourth game tomorrow, we will be doing a post game after the game, and hopefully we're talking about a Mets win. Thank you for tuning in to the Amazing Mets pregame show right here on the channels and on X. We'll see you later today. Let's go Mets, guys, and enjoy the game.
Let's go Mets.
Seven train rumble, headed to the field. Orange and blue vibes, the energy revealed. Brooklyn to Queens, repping both hoods. Rob and CP, keep it fire, miss.